watched Harry, the royal family really needs him. His interactions with people, he's so natural and friendly and warm. And Kate
I think
and William,
he misses this country.
Kate and,
Hang on, let's take a pause because we'll talk a bit more about this. We're going to ask if... Are we going to talk more about this? Maybe not. We're going to move on. So let's conclude. Go on.
Right.
Say what you're going to say.
I was just saying, the royal family needs Harry. Harry doesn't really need the royal family.
Christian? Other way around.
No, I think it's the other way around. I think Harry misses Britain. I think, frankly, over the coming years, he'll start to regret, being so badly persuaded away from his home and his family by Meghan Markle over a ridiculous reason.
He was pushed out.
He was the nation's sweetheart and he decided to run away.
No, he was pushed out because he was the nation's sweetheart, if you like to call him that, because he was more popular than Kate and William, and that could not be allowed to continue.
Now, if you just watched that clip and thought, wait, did she just say that out loud on UK daytime TV? Yes, she did. And more importantly, notice how fast the room tightened the moment Nina Myskow stopped tiptoeing and started speaking in full, dangerous sentences. Because up until that exact moment, everything was going according to the usual formula. You know the one. Light discussion, a little bit of Harry probably misses home, sprinkle in some gentle nostalgia, keep it soft, keep it safe, keep it comfortably predictable. The kind of conversation that makes you feel like you've heard it 100 times because you have. And then Nina walks in like someone who didn't get the memo about pretending. She starts with something almost harmless. Harry's natural, he's warm, he connects with people. Basic observations, right? Except even that is already slightly risky territory when you're talking about a system that prefers its personalities carefully portioned and evenly distributed. But she doesn't stop there. No, she keeps going. And you can actually feel the tension rising before she even lands the punchline. Jeremy Vine senses it too. That little, let's take a pause, wasn't random. That was instinct. That was a host realizing mid-conversation, oh, we're about to go somewhere the producers didn't sign off on. And still, she keeps going. The royal family needs Harry. Harry doesn't really need the royal family. That line didn't just land, it echoed, because it flips the entire narrative on its head. For years, the story has been carefully packaged as Harry walking away from something essential, something he supposedly can't replace, something he'll inevitably crawl back to. But Nina just walked in and said, actually, you might have that backwards. And the reaction? Immediate, predictable, almost rehearsed. Christian Calgie jumps in like he's been waiting backstage for his cue. Suddenly, it's all about regret, about persuasion, about Harry being led astray like he tripped over a banana peel and accidentally moved continents. And here's where it gets almost funny. The argument isn't even subtle. It's not Harry made a complicated decision. It's Harry was persuaded. By Meghan, of course, because apparently autonomy stops existing the moment Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, enters the sentence. It's such a tired script at this point. A grown man, a veteran, someone who has navigated public life since childhood, somehow becomes this helpless figure who couldn't possibly decide his own future. No, he must have been influenced, coached, led away. Because the alternative is uncomfortable. The alternative is that he saw something he didn't want to be part of anymore and made a choice. And Nina? She's not letting that slide. He was pushed out. Simple, direct, no PR cushioning, no soft language. And when they try to talk over it, she says it again. He was pushed out. That repetition matters because she knows exactly what's happening in that moment. Say it once, they'll reframe it. Say it twice, they'll interrupt. Say it a third time, and suddenly the segment needs to move on. And then she drops the line that really made everyone in that studio wish for a commercial break. Because he's more popular than Kate and William. You could practically hear the internal alarms going off. Now, let's be honest for a second. That statement, that line, is the kind of thing people whisper, debate online, argue about in comment sections. It's not the kind of thing you're supposed to say cleanly and clearly on a daytime panel with a straight face. but she said it anyway. And look what happens next. Jeremy Vine doesn't engage with it. He doesn't challenge it. He doesn't explore it. He shuts it down. Quick thank you, quick pivot, quick escape, like someone closing a door before a draft turns into a storm. Because once that idea is out in the open, you can't neatly pack it back into the box. Here's the thing that makes this moment so interesting. It's not just about what Nina said, it's about how everyone else reacted to it. That tells you more than the words themselves. When a narrative is comfortable, people debate it. They expand on it. They add nuance. But when a narrative is threatened, people rush to contain it. And that's exactly what you saw. Let's break down the core of her argument, because underneath all the TV theatrics, it's actually pretty straightforward.
Harry's appeal has always been rooted in something the institution doesn't fully control: personality, spontaneity, a kind of emotional openness that doesn't always fit neatly into royal protocol. He laughs too easily. He reacts too honestly. He doesn't always look like he's performing a role. And ironically, that's what made people connect with him in the first place. That kind of connection, it's powerful. And more importantly, it's unpredictable. Because you can manage image, you can manage appearances, but you can't fully script authenticity. And when someone becomes too good at connecting with people, it creates an imbalance. Now, suddenly, it's not just about hierarchy or titles. It's about presence, about impact, about who people actually respond to. And that's where things get complicated. Nina's point, whether people agree with it or not, is that Harry's value within that system wasn't just symbolic. It was functional. He brought something that can't be easily replaced: energy, relatability, a certain kind of emotional accessibility that made engagements feel less like performances and more like interactions. Take that away, and what are you left with? A system that still operates, sure, but maybe feels a little flatter, a little more controlled, a little less human. And that's not an attack. That's just an observation. Now, flip it around, like Christian tried to do. Harry will regret it. That argument relies on the idea that what he left behind is irreplaceable, that the structure itself is the source of value, and without it, he loses something essential. But here's the problem with that logic. It assumes that fulfillment only exists within that system, that identity is tied to it in a way that can't be recreated elsewhere. And clearly, Harry disagreed. Whether people like his choices or not, he made them, publicly, decisively, and he's continued to stand by them. That doesn't look like someone waiting for regret to kick in. That looks like someone who already weighed the cost and decided it was worth it. And this is where the conversation always circles back to Meghan. Because for some reason, it's easier to believe that Harry was influenced than to accept that he might have been done. It's easier to frame it as persuasion than as decision-making. But Nina wasn't playing that game. She cut right through it. He was pushed out. That statement shifts responsibility. It moves the conversation away from why did he leave to what made staying impossible. And that's a much more uncomfortable question. Because now you're not analyzing Harry, you're analyzing the environment he left behind. And daytime TV? Not exactly the place that loves digging into that kind of complexity. So what do they do instead? They pivot, they soften, they redirect. Maybe we'll move on. Of course you will, because staying on that topic would mean actually unpacking it. And unpacking it means acknowledging that the situation might not be as simple as he left and will regret it. It might be messier than that. It might involve pressure, expectation, internal dynamics that don't translate well into meat TV segments. And once you start going down that road, you can't easily control where it leads. So, the safest option? Shut it down. But here's the irony. In trying to contain the conversation, they made it more revealing. Because people aren't just listening to what's being said anymore. They're watching how it's being handled.
They notice the interruptions, the quick transitions, the way certain points are allowed to breathe while others are cut off mid-sentence. And that creates its own narrative, one where the most interesting part isn't the debate itself, but the effort to manage it. Now, step back and look at the bigger picture. This wasn't just a random TV moment. It's part of a larger pattern, a pattern where certain viewpoints are amplified, repeated, reinforced. And others? They appear briefly, cause a ripple, and then get smoothed over. But every now and then, someone like Nina slips through and says something just disruptive enough to break the rhythm. Not long enough to dominate the conversation, but long enough to make people pause and think, wait, why did that feel different? And that's all it takes, because once a thought is introduced, it doesn't just disappear because the segment ended. People carry it with them. They replay it. They compare it to everything else they've heard. And suddenly, the narrative isn't as stable as it used to be. Now, does that mean Nina's perspective is universally accepted? Of course not. But it doesn't have to be. The power of that moment wasn't in convincing everyone. It was in challenging the assumption that there's only one acceptable way to interpret the situation. And judging by how quickly the conversation was shut down, that challenge landed hard. What makes that moment even more ridiculous, in a fascinating way, is how transparent the hierarchy of opinions becomes when things go slightly off script. Notice how quickly Nina's points are treated like they need moderation, while the Harry will regret it angle just gets to stroll in, sit down, and stretch its legs. No interruption, no urgent pause, no sudden need to move things along. It just exists comfortably, like it's part of the furniture. And that tells you everything. It's not about balance. It's about which narrative feels safe enough to let breathe without supervision. The second something challenges that comfort zone, the tone shifts, voices tighten, timing gets weird. Suddenly, everyone's very aware of the clock. Funny how that works. And let's talk about that "he misses Britain" line, because it keeps getting recycled like it's some profound psychological insight instead of a polite guess dressed up as certainty. Missing a place and choosing not to return to a system are not the same thing, but the way it's framed, you'd think homesickness automatically cancels out every other factor. Humans are capable of holding two conflicting feelings at once. Shocking, I know. You can miss familiarity and still recognize that staying came with conditions you weren't willing to keep accepting. But that nuance? Too messy for a neat TV segment. It's much easier to flatten it into a story where longing eventually leads to regret, because that keeps everything comfortably predictable. Then there's the almost comical urgency to reassign agency. The second Harry's decision starts looking intentional, the narrative scrambles to repackage it. Suddenly, he didn't choose, he was persuaded. He didn't step away, he was led. It's like watching autonomy get quietly edited out in real time. Because if you admit he acted on his own terms, then you also have to accept that maybe, just maybe, the situation he left behind wasn't as flawless as it's often presented. And that's the part no one on that panel seemed particularly eager to unpack. So instead, they circle around it, redirect it, soften it, anything to avoid sitting in that discomfort for more than a few seconds.
There's also something almost theatrical about how quickly popularity becomes a forbidden topic the moment it stops being convenient. When it's useful, it's celebrated, paraded around, turned into headlines and smiling photo ops. But the second someone suggests that popularity might shift the balance, suddenly it's treated like gossip that needs to be shut down immediately. Nina didn't invent the idea out of thin air. She just said it plainly, without the usual cushioning. And that's what made it land so hard. Because once you acknowledge that public connection can influence internal dynamics, you're no longer just talking about tradition or duty. You're talking about relevance. And relevance is a much messier, less controllable thing. And maybe the most telling part of all this is how little time anyone wanted to spend actually engaging with her core point. Not dismantling it, not debating it properly, just moving past it. Because engaging would mean taking it seriously, and taking it seriously means risking where that conversation could lead. It might lead to questions about how value is measured, about who gets to define importance, about whether the system adapts or just expects people to fit into it indefinitely. Those aren't quick, tidy questions. They don't wrap up neatly before the next segment. So instead, the conversation gets gently escorted away, like a guest who's overstayed their welcome, simply by being a little too honest. So next time you see one of these balanced discussions, pay attention to what doesn't get explored. Pay attention to who gets interrupted, who gets the last word, and which ideas seem to make the room just a little too uncomfortable. Because sometimes the most honest part of the conversation is the part they're trying to move past as quickly as possible. And in this case, that part had a name, and she said exactly what she came to say. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.